Grand Rising, I'm Ron Usha, and welcome to show 3 on Conversations on Art, a program where we invite artists onto the show to talk about their creativity, how they work, the challenges that arise, and hopefully through this medium we can share together and hopefully learn from each other. So thank you very much for joining. First, I'm going to introduce the co-host for today, Claire, a multimedia artist. Grand Rising, Claire.
Hello.
And our guest for today is an honored guest. I'm very privileged to have TJ on the show. So, Grand Rising, TJ.
Hello, thank you.
I do a bit of background into TJ. So I taught TJ in primary school from reception to year 6. And we've kept in contact over the years, and to see the progression of her work and see the progression of TJ as just a human being has been a pleasure to witness. And to have TJ on the show is an honor. So
thank you so much. That's very sweet. Thank you.
Thank you, TJ. So TJ, can you tell us about your work and what you do?
Sure. So I am I mainly focus on painting as opposed to drawing. I use a lot of very bright colors. I used to work in watercolor only, but I've sort of branched out into like acrylic work. I'm hopefully going to start training to be a tattoo artist in September, if everything goes right. And I don't know, I try really hard to sort of, my work surrounds sort of painting Black people in places of being happy and of being, enjoying life, and rather than being shown as being sort of down, and like in most sort of media, that's how we're represented. So I try and focus on very bright, happy colors and very sort of peaceful art surrounding, Black joy most of the time.
I found just looking at the Instagram posts really inspirational, the way you portray the skin and the hair of Black and brown bodies, and I found it really beautiful.
Thank you.
I guess it's something that, like you said, we don't see that often.
Yeah, I noticed that in the last sort of 2 years, as my sort of art style like progressed, I guess, when I saw Black people in art, it was always, we're suffering, look at this horrible thing that's happened, look at, here's a painting to show we are suffering. And I said, I want to think, this is very true, but I want us to be seen as being able to be happy and being able to live like joyful lives as well. So I try and capture that with like the bright colors and sort of in what I do as much as I can.
So how does, at the moment, your time at college, how does that coincide with the work that you're doing for yourself?
Yeah, it's time-wise, it can be a bit difficult because I'm under like a lot of pressure to do as much coursework as I can, and there's a lot of it as well because it's digital art as well as like physical paintings. But I do try very hard to like set aside time to paint just because I want to, because also if I do commissions as well, I love doing commissions, but I also sometimes like to paint just like what I feel like painting. So I always try and set aside some time to just paint what I feel like I want to make, as opposed to like a commission or some coursework or something that I like have to do, if that makes sense.
I noticed as well that there's a lot of self-portraits.
Yeah.
What have you learned about yourself while you're doing these self-portraits? Or have you learned about yourself doing them?
It's really interesting because I have some of my oldest self-portraits from when I was like 12. And to see like the way I don't even realize I'm doing it, but the way that I paint myself has changed like drastically. And I'm not really sure what I've learned necessarily. It's just really, really interesting to see how like even just like the way I paint myself when I was a lot younger compared to now. I guess with like my progression as a person has changed drastically, and I didn't really notice it until like a month ago when I found all of them and I looked through all of them. And I was like, oh, this is really, really weird. The way it's changed so like dramatically, but yeah, it's very interesting.
In what way would you say it's changed? Like, is it changed the way you look at yourself, or actually the way in which you use the medium, or probably both?
I think it's a mix of both. I think when I was younger, I was very like hyper focused on making it like this has to look as much like me as possible. Like it has to look like someone would see that and immediately go, "That's TJ. I know that's TJ." And like all the but now it's like I want it to look like me, but I'm less focused on like making it hyper realistic, and I think that's allowed me to be a bit more free in like the way that I paint. Because even though I want it to be recognizable as like me, I'm not as like hyper focused on if this doesn't look exactly like me, then I don't like it, you know. So that's a little bit freeing, yeah.
Yeah, I had the feeling also. I think your last post is also this pretty impressive portrait you made with the colorful colors and these like I think it's different types of pens, right?
Yeah,
Or
yeah,
acrylic pens maybe. um and yeah, I also see like it does a lot look like you, but then all the medium kind of takes space inside. It's
yeah,
also a lot about the medium and the color that gains a sort of space through that image you give. I'm
yeah.
wondering, so yeah, how does the medium then inspire you, these bright colors? And also I see often you use these different types of lines and pens that foreground and background kind of melt into each other somehow. I don't know. I'm wondering if you have something to say about this.
Yeah, so the reason why, in all honesty, the reason why I started painting with like bright colors was initially it was that I got very bored of the work I was doing because I used to only do like black and white, like pencil drawings. And at the time, the only like media I had was the watercolor set we'd gotten from my secondary school. And it wasn't enough to like do skin tones the way I wanted to. So I thought, okay, I'm going to try and do like really like bright colors that are not like normal skin tones. And from there, it kind of developed into what it is now with the lines. Again, it was one time I'd done a painting and I was really not happy with it. And I just thought, okay, I'll try doing the line work. If I hate it, it's okay because I'm not a huge fan of the painting anyway. And if I like it, that's cool. And it just sort of developed into that. And yeah, the more I get comfortable with not being so focused on it being like hyper realistic, the more I'm like able to experiment with like how I do the lines, how many I put in, like what colors I put in and stuff like that as well.
Yeah, lovely. I always find it quite inspiring how, as you said, like watercolors just can't allow you to get to that brightness.
Yeah,
it's just not the right
it's
medium.
difficult.
It's
Yeah,
interesting. I also see in my own practice how sometimes the medium has certain possibilities and certain limitations we can play with and get inspired from the medium and from its limitation, and also push its possibility and discover new things from it. And yeah, I
yeah.
don't know. I find it.
You know, it's with watercolor as well. I used to only paint watercolor just because that's what I've been given from school. But then when I went to college, they gave us an acrylic set, and I realized, oh wait, this is a lot easier to get like bold, bright colors in it.
Yeah.
So I still sometimes use watercolor, but very rarely. I sort of mostly stick to acrylic now because it gets like the look that I like better, like easier, I guess, than having to like, because with watercolor I have to go over it over and over again to get like a bright look to it. So yeah.
I wonder if you ever thought about spray paint.
Yeah, I the only problem with that is that like it would create a big mess in my room. And I don't
Yeah,
really have like the station to do it, but I really, really want to do that at some point. Yeah, definitely.
yeah. I can imagine also big size and spray paint. I can see it.
Yeah.
I can see you rocking that medium in
Thank
a
you.
very interesting way.
Hopefully one day if I find like a I don't know, like a wall or something and someone who could like teach me how to do it, I would love to do that, yeah.
I see it growing.
So you're both saying about acrylic and watercolors. Can you explain to me, just both of you, what the difference is? I mean, and what each of these methods brings out in your arts?
Do you want to go first? Because I feel like I've spoken a lot.
Yeah, well, at the moment, I don't particularly use, I don't paint so much lately, but for sure the mediums, I played around with both. Well, watercolor, I think it's way more subtle and gradient, and it's way more easier to make layers, overlapping layers of different tones and colors. So you create volume by overlaying sort of light gradients somehow. Whether acrylic, it's way more bold. You can still shade things out in a quite precise way, but it's way more direct in terms of tone and intensity, I think.
Yeah, and I think also when you paint with watercolor, once you've put it on there, it's very hard to like, you can't really paint over it. Whereas with acrylic, if you make a mistake, it's quite easy to sort of fix it by painting over it, and it's a lot harder to do that with watercolor as well.
Yeah. On one hand, if you haven't tried oil, that's also really interesting because it's sort of a mix between watercolor and acrylic, because it's still really bold. You can continuously cover, cancel, overlap, but you can also do a sort of related gradients as watercolors can do.
Yeah, I haven't tried it yet, but I've seen a lot of like really not like really like sort of bold, but not like necessarily bright, just really like nice looking paintings that are done with oil. So I do want to try that at some point. Yeah.
TJ, I saw in one of the drawings, I think it's a lady with dreadlocks and she has the third eye.
Yeah.
Is there a spiritual component to your work?
I think it kind of depends. It's more that like I really like painting like pixies and fairies and like elves and things like that. But whenever I saw them in media, it was tended to be white. Whether it was like storybooks or TV shows, it was always like white fairies with really long straight hair. And I thought, okay, I want to do this, but in my own way. So if I add like a sort of, I don't know, like fantasy element to the people I draw, it's something I don't see a lot, and I quite like that. So I wanted to try that as well. Yeah.
Have you heard of Afrofuturism?
Futurism, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I love it.
Yeah. So I don't know. There's a novelist. Is it N.K. Jemisin?
I haven't heard of him. No.
Afrofuturist author, and I've recently, I've been looking at pictures of Africa in the space age and different ways of being and colored dress and that kind of stuff. And I think has that inspired you at all, Afrofuturism? Can you please explain in your words what Afrofuturism means to you?
So it's such a like beautiful concept, and the art that it creates, I've always just been fascinated with. But it's essentially like placing Africa in a sort of an African people and black and brown bodies in a futuristic sort of setting. So like the space era, where with sort of like it's taking like a what's the word I'm looking for? Like it's a spin-off of sort of traditional our traditions and making it into like futurism, and it always just looks so beautiful. It's not something you see often. And it's like with the bright colors, and there's always the amazing hair, and everything just looks so beautiful. It's not something you see most of the time. So I definitely took a lot of inspiration from it. Yeah, a lot.
So before this recording started, TJ noticed the John Coltrane picture behind, and in his music, I find is an Afrofuturism concept, and Alice Coltrane as well. So maybe you might be interested to look at or listen to what they're saying.
Yeah, I only sort of found jazz. I only started listening to jazz quite recently. I have the friend that I bought the vinyl for is really, really, really into jazz, and I only sort of started listening to it recently. But I found that I really like listening to it when I paint because I feel like I'm listening to a story even though no one's saying anything. So it's like I didn't know who, do you know Chick Corea?
Yes.
I didn't know who he was until he passed away recently. And then I was like, I've listened to his music a lot and I was like, this is like, I feel like someone's speaking to me as I'm like listening to it. So I've started painting with jazz more than I used to because it's just really nice to listen to, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's beautiful how you talk about this, like how music can tell a story without using words.
Yeah.
I think it's this quite beautiful way that music as other forms of art have, that is this kind of like, we're so used to explain concepts through language and feelings through language as if we can actually picture everything through words. And then all of a sudden a song comes up and that's just so much, the whole story comes in one block somehow. It doesn't need, it's like so intense and real and you can't explain it. It's like having an idea. Sometimes you have an idea and there's a whole project that comes in 1 second. And then if you write it down, to write it or to paint it, it takes ages. But when it comes, it's like this instantaneous like information that it's all together. And sometimes music has that emotional impact. Also artworks, paintings, or different types of art related experiences can have that. I thought it was nice, that note of like how it's like if it says a whole story but it's not saying it.
Yeah, it's really nice. Like I think also it kind of changes when I like personally, obviously, when I found that when I paint with like songs that are telling me things and they're telling a story, sometimes it does sort of, I feel like unless I'm painting something with like an end goal already, it can like change the direction of where I'm going. So unless I had like an idea of where I want to get to by the end of the painting, sometimes I just paint and see what comes of it. And if I listen to music that's not physically telling me a story, it kind of, I don't know, it just kind of changes the way that I paint it, because I feel like I'm not being like influenced in some way, if that makes sense. I don't know if it does. But it's nice to have that, yeah.
Yeah, but it's a bit like this, say, being influenced on one hand, well, influenced how we are taught to think about art. We're not taught to think it as a too much of a good thing somehow. But in these terms, I think it's beautiful in the sense like how music can influence, or how I was before the recording started, I was telling to Rana that it's spring suddenly. These last 2 days is spring, and that somehow I feel has an influence on all of us in quite a majestic way. I feel that people around me are smiling, and my cat is happy, and that the plants are happy, and that's a sort of like non-direct influence.
Yeah.
That we don't really acknowledge, but it's there. It's undeniable that we are influenced by the weather, for example, or by the music we're listening to, or the place in which we live, or I don't know. I find it quite special how they are these external echoes that influence us. I sometimes think like being in my art academy, and then that I'm realizing definitely has an influence on my artistic practice. Just because it's this specific academy and not your academy, for example, in which there's going to be a different context and different people.
Yeah.
I find that just fascinating on how much we are actually constantly influenced by the world around us without maybe even knowing it. A bit like the music, as you were saying, no, the music that we listen to has an influence on the painting we're drawing.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's as well with like the weather. I don't even notice it until someone points it out. But like the second it makes sense. It's just interesting to think about. Like the second it gets a bit sunnier and less rainy, I feel a bit more energy, and it does make sense. It's just really interesting to like think about, because you don't even really notice it until someone goes, "Oh, it's really sunny outside," and you sort of go, "Oh yeah, I feel a little bit." Maybe not always, but I feel a little bit better today, a little bit more energy.
Yeah.
So before we were speaking, and I guess so we talked about how just coming together as people who are who are doing the creative projects. What's it like working on your own, TJ? I mean, how is that for you?
I when it comes to like coursework, I guess I found it a lot easier to work in college, because I think when you're in the environment where everyone around you is working, and it's almost like you're there, so you have to work because you've made the journey, you're here, you might as well use the time to do the work whilst you're there. It's a lot harder for me to do that when I'm at home, because it also feels like my perception of time has gotten really weird in lockdown. I kind of forget that there are each, like, from my sleep schedules to everything, I sort of forget that like I should be using the days to do more work. But it has helped me with doing work that I want to do, because I don't really have a like perception of time that's right. I don't feel like I'm under pressure to like finish something because I've got something else to do. So it has helped with me being able to make more work that I want to do, but it's been really difficult to do actual coursework.
Have you found college to be rigid or stifled you in any way, or did they kind of foster your creativity?
I think I'm quite lucky in that my college is they have a sort of very free way of saying, we give you the topic and then you do what you want to do. At least with most of my teachers anyway. There's a couple that are a lot more like you have to stick to the sort of bullet points, but with most of them, they sort of give you the general topic of what you're supposed to do and then say, run with it, interpret it how you want. You know, as long as it relates back to the theme, just do whatever you feel like works with it. So luckily, I don't feel like, most of the time I feel like the work that I do, I actually do like doing. So I don't feel like I'm sort of being made to do things that I don't really want to paint or I don't really want to look into. Most of the time it is quite free, yeah.
And how did you find when you started putting your work on Instagram and other people started to view? I mean, so I viewed this morning. So what's that like? People seeing your work?
It's really, really weird. The only reason why I did it was when I first started, I had a friend who, he saw my work and he said, oh, you should, like, there's no harm in like putting yourself out there. And I was very scared because I was like, well, the second I sort of take it out of like my room, anyone can see it and anyone can say whatever they want about it, and they can, you know, share it anywhere and say whatever they want about it. And as they should be able to, because you can interpret whatever you want, how you want. But luckily it seems to have gone well. I still get very scared every time I share anything, but I think because I haven't had like people being nasty about it, it sort of makes, I don't feel like I still have like the general anxiety of, oh, I'm putting my work out there, but not like the fear of, oh, what if people don't like it? What if it goes wrong? So it has genuinely been quite nice, because also I think I'm the only one like seeing my work all the time, I get very, 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 very critical of it. So it's nice to see like someone who's completely impartial say, oh yeah, this is actually all right. This is okay. I like this. It's a nice feeling. Yeah.
I also thought it was quite nice too when I looked at your Instagram page today that you can somehow keep track of progress. Like I was going down and down, and it's quite also an amazing way of like for yourself. It's a sort of like self diary of progress, and you see all these little images. It's also, I find it quite interesting how things in reality have a different size, and sometimes then you put them on Instagram and they're all the same size, one beside the other. Whatever the original size and medium and shape was, it now it's digital and it's the same sort of like structure. But it has something nice about it. Like I thought that when I was looking at your page that there's this nice like association between the different mediums and the different steps, and how you can go down and trace like the evolution of your hands and mind. It's quite fascinating. Yeah,
I think because at the start, like the main thing that I noticed is that I didn't even really realize I was doing it, but I used to only do like pencil or pen, like black and white, always. And I also, again, I was a lot of the time very like fixed on, I want it to look like what I'm like, I want it to look really realistic, and that's what I'm going for. And as sort of time went on and I stopped being so focused on that, I I just kind of like what I do more. I'm not always happy with it, but I just have more fun, I guess, painting now than I did at the very, very start. So yeah, it's a nice thing to sort of, I guess, see the progression of it sort of.
Yeah. Yeah. I find it interesting how you say like this idea of like liking and not liking certain things. I look at myself that we have this tendency to be, at least I have that tendency sometimes to be quite judgmental towards what I make, as if there's some kind of like mental concept that what I do has to belong to somehow. And then I find it interesting when then sometimes I look back at things and I'm like, oh, but I was so harsh with myself towards that thing, but this is actually quite good.
Yeah.
How that mental idea I can have, it can be so rigid, and then it's like totally unveils its relativity of that mental stubbornness I have towards myself. It's a bit maybe what you were saying also when you're not too keen about something, and then on through Instagram someone says, oh, I really like that, it's great.
Yeah. And I think also I found if you stare at your work for too long, you start to hate it, even if there's nothing wrong with it. So I found that if I work on like a painting for like hours and hours and hours, when I put it down, I'll go, oh, no, this is awful. Then I pick up the next day and I go, actually, no, it's all right. I think the more you look at it, the more you see things wrong with it, even if there's nothing. So yeah.
It reminds me of this text of Agnes Martin. She's this like abstract painting that makes lots of these sort of grid related painting. And then I was reading a text which is The Beauty is the Mystery of Life, which I would recommend to read it. It's amazing. And at some point she really invites to look at artworks not with a mental sort of idea of how they should be or how we want to see them or what we want them to be, but to just really learn to like be with them, like to stop the head and just really realize on how is my body reacting to it, and what are my emotions when I look at this artwork. And I thought, since I read that text, sometimes I go to museum or also with my own work, but it's easier also with other people's work. And then I just sit there and then I'm like, okay, don't think about it. Just be with this artwork, Claire. And the question, like, what is your body doing, helps me so much sometimes in just realizing my response to the work, instead of like not my mental response, but my physical response. And sometimes I realize that maybe I'm sitting in front of a painting and then I realize that I'm doing this with my head, or I'm doing this with my mouth, or different little things that I'm not aware of. So I don't know, sometimes I think it's nice also maybe to apply that to the work. Sometimes you work so much on something, as you were saying, and then you start hating it. And the morning after you think, oh, it's actually quite okay. And then maybe to sit and think, not what I think about it, but just what does my body tell me?
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot.
It can be quite a nice, at least to me, it was a nice discovery. It's kind of, because sometimes I feel we're so judgmental towards what we make. And it's nice to just see if it's possible to look at it without that judgment or expectation about it.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
So to both of you, I think a lot of times it's that judgment of, is it good enough? Have you had those thoughts, and how have you overcome them? Because I know that, for instance, when in school many years ago, I just got the feeling that I couldn't draw because I wasn't good enough. I was comparing work to other people, and that stayed for many, many years. So how have you dealt with self-criticism or your own criticisms to actually just go on with your work?
Honestly, I do find it quite difficult, and I do have a lot of work that I've sort of just put aside and not finished just because I need to wait till a time when I can look at it and go, yeah, okay, I feel like I can keep going with it. So the way I sort of deal with it is I don't make myself paint something that I don't like. I don't want to, if I start something and I get to a point where I'm like, you know what, I'm not a fan of it, I'll put it aside, start something new, and wait till I feel like, okay, you know what, I'm going to come back to this and try it again, rather than like trying to keep working on it until I like it. Because then if I don't end up liking it, it's going to frustrate me even more. So my way is just sort of like take a break and don't make myself keep working on it if I really just don't feel like it's doing too good.
And Claire?
Well, I guess I try to, I mean, on one hand, I think that it's a good guidance. The only guidance somehow we have is what we feel about our work. So there is that certain, which can be called a sort of judgment. I mean, this thing, I feel it's good or it's not good, or it's not good enough, I still have to go on it, it's not finished. That it can be seen as a sort of like judgment, which on that hand it's helpful. But on the other hand, sometimes I realize that there's lots of judgments that come from that external influencer that we were talking also about before, which can be the music, but it can also be the art institution I'm inside of, or the idea that I think that some things are cliche, or that some things are not good enough because they have already been made. I don't know. I think there are lots of these ideas. And then I think it's good to, I don't know, I myself try to spot them at least. Then it doesn't mean I can get rid of them, but at least I try to be aware that, oh, I'm not doing this thing because I'm just afraid of that stereotype or that judgment. And then I try to allow myself to do it anyway if I'm actually thinking that it could be nice to do it, or it could be fun to try that out. So it's a bit, I think, to me, balancing between what type of judgment. Is it my creative sensor, or how do we want to call it, that says me, no, I have to work on, or as you said, I have to put it away and give it a break and work on it later? Or is it a cultural judgment that I somehow have in my head? And then those I try to, if I see them, I try to not listen to them too much.
TJ, have you had moments where you're so into what you're drawing, you've kind of lost track of what you're doing or even who you are? Have you had those moments?
Yeah, like I think a couple of times I can sort of pinpoint with like particular pieces of work where I get like, I do nothing else for like I don't even realize I'm doing it. Like I'll eat, I'll have my dinner, and I'll be painting whilst I'm doing it. And I'll be talking to people and I'm painting whilst I'm doing it. It can go on for like 2 days. That's the only thing I can do because I'm so like focused on, I just really, that's all I want to do now is I want to paint this, that I just sort of do nothing else. And I don't think that's bad. I think that's a good thing. I think that's a nice thing because in my head it's better than having like artist block where I've got nothing to do. So it has happened to me a couple of times where with a couple of like pieces that I've done, I can think that is just, I just like banged it out and that's all I did. So, and normally I can work quite quick. So I do it, like it normally would take me like 2 days to do like a big thing, normally because I will just work on it nonstop. But yeah, it has happened to me a couple of times where I just get, that's the only thing I'm invested in is just doing that. Yeah.
Does that feel like the art is more like it's coming through you rather than by you? It's just, how does that feel?
Yeah, it's like I would definitely say there's like, for like me personally, I can sort of separate the way that I paint into 2 different ways. One is that I have an end goal, I know what I want it to look like, and I'm working from A to B. And then more on what you said, where it's like, I'm not really sure what it is I'm doing. I'm just sort of doing it and doing what feels like, and I don't really have an ending to what I want the paint to look like. And that feels a lot more like, I think I tend to like that better because I don't really have an expectation of what I want it to look like at the end. And so if it doesn't look like what I don't have the idea of like, oh, it didn't look like what I wanted it to get to. And I do really like getting properly invested in like one thing and just feeling like I don't really need to do anything else besides like finish it. Yeah.
I noticed as well in your paintings, the hair, the afro.
Yeah.
How you've drawn it in such a, is it regal way, beautiful images.
Yeah.
Can you please explain, go behind, you explained a bit before, but can you go into especially the hair?
Yeah, so I for the majority of my life I didn't really care about, I didn't like my hair at all, and I thought it was like it would get in the way, and I'd always straighten, and I was always dyeing it constantly because I was just like, I don't like my natural hair. And even though my mum was always telling me like, TJ, you should just let it like do its thing, it's really nice, it looks okay, and I was like, no, I wanted to have straight hair all the time. And then what happened was basically when I discovered who Angela Davis was, and I saw what she looked like, and I was just like, just in awe of her, and I was like, why don't I try and do that? I could. That's so beautiful, and I really like it. And she sort of made me realize that there's nothing wrong with, the way my natural hair is. It's not like messy. It's not in the way. It's not even really extravagant. It's just the way it is. And so when I started painting people, I wanted to convey how important our hair is, especially when you don't really see it being portrayed like that in media, and then when you go to school, and it's not like a spectacle. It's just what it is, and it's beautiful. And I wanted to put that sort of in my art and have people see that, like, natural hair is great, and we don't have to sort of alter it and fix it to sort of look more like what we've been told is beautiful, because it is beautiful as it is. So I wanted to make a point of making sure that I like took the time to paint or draw natural hair like as best as I could. Yeah.
So was that a kind of flowering of you as well? Yeah,
and I think in my, I've noticed, again, I didn't even really realize I was doing it, but I've noticed in self-portraits, my hair over the years has become bigger and also more like important in the paintings, I guess. And the more I started to take care of it, and the more I started to appreciate it and let it do its thing, as opposed to like trying to straighten it or whatever I was doing to it, the more that I tried to reflect that in the work I did. And I always wanted to have, whether it was locks or huge afro, whatever it was, I always wanted to show that in my work. Especially also because if I'd seen more just art, I guess, and like stories or like illustrations when I was younger with people whose hair looked like mine, I think I would have been more willing to go, actually, yeah, it looks all right. It's okay. I kind of like it. So, yeah.
I think that representation is so important. When you see people who look like you and they're so comfortable in who they are. So you said Angela Davis, who's got this huge afro, and especially in that time when they were all growing it does bring out something in you.
Yeah,
it does really bring out this kind of, I'm okay to be me. Yes.
Yeah, and I think when I see just, I guess, because also when I was younger, a lot of people did, like, sort of classmates stuff said to me in sort of secondary school, oh, your hair looks really nice when it's been sort of straightened, and I sort of went, yeah, okay, all right, this is like approval that I've been looking for, like I've got it. But when you see videos of, like, for example, there's a particular video that always stuck with me of Kathleen Cleaver, and she's talking about, and she's surrounded by all these people with these beautiful afros, and I saw her talking, and I was like, why did I spend so many years trying to destroy my own hair, you know? And I wanted, when I paint, I want people to feel like they can see it and go, oh, okay, this looks all right. I don't have to change it. It looks good. But yeah.
Is that the clip when she says, "We got afros, ain't it beautiful"?
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah.
I love that video. Yeah, it's one of my favorite. It just genuinely made me feel like, okay, yeah, I'm gonna stick with this. I like this.
Okay, so this is to both of you again. So we talked about the Afrofuturism aspects in TJ's work, but for both of you, what does the word magic or even fantasy, does that have anything to do? Does that have anything to do with your work? If TJ, you go first.
Well, yeah, I've always really liked frogs and mushrooms and pixies and like elves and stuff like that. I don't know why. Like, I've got a little mushroom necklace now, and I've got mushroom. Like, I don't know. It's just a thing that I've always liked. So I also try and just incorporate that. I really like painting, like, sort of, like, I guess, sort of mystical, like, little worlds, like, I don't know, mushroom houses and things like that. So I also try and incorporate that kind of fantasy element into the work I do as well, with also like the bright colors and stuff like that.
And Claire?
Yeah, for sure. I do tend to think it less maybe in a related to fantasy, the idea of magic, which it is clearly related to fantasy also. But in my sense, I like the word a lot, but I tend to use it more concerning the fact that everything can be seen as magical if we change the way we look at it. So that's yeah. But of course, I am obsessed with magic movies. I'm literally like biggest fan of Harry Potter and every possible magic related pixie fairy. I was convinced that fairy existed till I was 15 probably. So I'm a big fan of like extraordinary magic, but even a bigger fan of ordinary magic, I think. What about you, Ran? Does magic has to do with your
Yes.
purpose?
And so I guess over the years, noticing the simple things that I guess before was oblivious to, you know, to my everyday life. Because I think so long you end up naming things, but say for instance, you look at a tree and get rid of the label tree and see it for as it is, then there's this connection there. And I began to see that even, you know, in everyday situations, in different circumstances, and speaking and meeting new people and learning, I think we're surrounded by magic. I think maybe all it is magic, but we see the mundane. And even in situations like this, when we're talking and sharing and we're learning from each other, it's quite incredible that we can be in different parts of the world and we're learning like this. Yeah, so and also when you can when we see this kind of judging, criticizing mind, and we can be in it and just flow with it and live in the I don't know, that I don't know is total, I guess we can call it magic. It's that freedom of expressing, you know, and that's something, you know, that's been learned especially over the last few years. Definitely.
But this I don't know feeling you're talking about is probably it's also related to what TJ, you were talking about, this feeling of like when you just don't know where the painting is going, and how that those moments, and you're so into it, and that's just what has to happen. It's happening now. I don't know what's happening, but I'm just going with it. Somehow that's magical, and it's super related to this feeling of I don't know you were talking about. The fact that you don't, it's not, the painting doesn't have to be a tree, as using what here beside Ran was saying, but it has to be something, but I don't know what it is. That also, I think, enhances that magic feeling in a creative process.
Yeah, and I also think because it is often sort of very natural to want to know and to want to have an end goal and to want to know sort of where you're going. So it's nice when you can sort of, I guess, release yourself from that a little bit and just sort of allow yourself to do, as opposed to thinking it has to end here. I have to know what happens. I have to have a plan for where it's going to end, what it's going to look like, and if it doesn't, then I don't like it. So yeah, that's nice. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I don't want to embarrass Claire, but there's a story that I'll tell both. Is that a couple of years ago on the tube, I saw you blowing those bubbles. So she had, those things that you can blow bubbles, yes? Blow bubbles.
Yeah.
So there are people on the tube who are sitting, they're going to work or whatever, and Claire blows the bubbles. And all of a sudden, this carriage changed. And so people are, they're smiling and they're pushing the bubbles. And
lovely.
I was like, really, it's like, wow, because it felt like a whole energetic change. So, and I think we're talking about magic, and that was it really. So, and I found that very, very inspirational. I remember coming back and telling a few people, Claire, sorry. Yeah, I mean, it was just very inspirational. And I think one of the things, if talking to both of you, is that when you talk, your faces shine and you see that you're really into what you're doing. And that's a real pleasure to see.
Yeah, which I try. I try my best.
So TJ, so you're at college now. So where do you have any idea where you think you'll be going in the next day, month, year?
Yeah, well, my plan is, so my plan has always been, since I was sort of quite early into my teens, that I wanted to do tattooing. I'm sort of finally at a place where I'm going to start doing that. And I'm really, really excited because I that's something I've always liked. The idea of being able to put art on someone that they actually really like and they'll keep with them and they'll you sort of feel proud of it is just a really nice like feeling. So I'm really happy to start that. And then literally like a week ago, I saw a video of someone who he got his job is he restores paintings for a living. And I saw what he was doing and I was like, I don't know, it looks so cool. It looks like so much fun. And I'm not about to know where I'm about to like change my entire sort of path, but I kept that in mind, and I started thinking like, maybe 10, 15 years down the line after I've been tattooing for a long time, I really want to look into that. And it's a weird, like, it's very sudden. I only found it like a week ago, but it looks like such a nice thing to be able to do, sort of bring life back to a painting that's 400 years old. So I think when I'm a lot older, that's something that I'll think about again. Yeah.
Are there? Can you name artists that have inspired you to maybe go in different directions?
Like painters or just people in general?
Anybody, painters, singers, dancers.
There's a couple of like. So one of my favorite musicians is a French singer. Her name's Edith Piaf, and I don't. Again, her storytelling in her songs is something that I really, really, really love. So she's and also she's lived a really, really, really difficult life, and she's come out of it as this like amazing storyteller with this beautiful voice. And so that's really she's really, really inspired me. I listen to her music a lot. And then obviously I would say probably my biggest icon is Angela Davis. And so I look a lot of the time at her, just the way she speaks and the things she writes and the way she carries everything she does. And I look to her a lot of the time as like, I don't know, just as very big inspiration. And yeah, I don't know. I could think of a lot of like bands and musicians and stuff, and also there's an artist he's the vocalist in a band that I really like, and his name's Stefan Burnett, and he does paintings as well. And I think you like his paintings are crazy to look at because they look so eerily real, whilst also you can tell that they're a painting. It's this really, really odd contrast, and I think you'd really like them. But I like his work a lot as well. Yeah, so there's a lot of different kinds of things.
And you, Claire, any particular artists or singers in whatever form who really inspire you?
Yeah, for sure. I think that my inspirational master is James Turrell. He's an artist that makes the sort of like installation spaces, sometimes outdoor. Like an example can be like he made like different outdoor sitting areas with these rooftops that have a hole in the ceiling through which you can see the sky. And then there are these different colors in the roof area, which make you see differently the sky. And then it creates this amazing contemplative space with all these people sitting underneath and just gazing at the sky as if it was the first time they ever saw it. Or he's also making this huge project. He's like working 50 years on it that is in this volcano in some desert in America. And from outside, it looks basically the same, but then it has these little tunnels from which you can go inside. And then you have all these like inner kind of pathways, and you have certain circular rooms of different shapes, which channelize a specific star point. So there's a certain time in which you can be inside of that room. And if you sit in that room, you're going to absorb the oldest light of our galaxy. Because that specific hole is at a specific point that at that time you can literally like be enlightened by that super ancient light. So he's like, I think my master. His works are a lot related to this idea of like decontextualizing ordinary elements and showing the extraordinary nature, so to say. Yeah. And you, what are your artistic inspirations?
Well, I've got two behind me, so it's so John Coltrane, and musically it's Fela Kuti. I love 70s Afro funk, which I play most days, every day. And recently I've been looking at, a lot of photography of ancient Egypt or drawings of ancient Egypt and the true historical significance of Egypt. So that kind of stuff is really inspiring me at the moment. And I also liked, I watch a lot of films and movies. So films like by, what's his name? Chris Nolan, who did Inception and Tenet. Oh, yeah. And that kind of, those films which look at space and time, and he kind of changes and molds them until you look at them in a different way. So anything like that. But I think depending on the day you ask me, it could be a number of different authors or singers or painters, anything like that. Yes.
Nice. You should check out, if you like Inception, Actually, Inception is inspired by this cartoon called Paprika, which, just as a notion, check it out. I think it's this, I think it's Chinese cartoon, but it's amazing. Just check it out. Sorry, as a notion, because it really comes, and it comes, the idea of inception of the dream inside of the dream, sort of inspired by that cartoon, which is quite mind blowing.
And also, I guess as well, it's having these conversations. It's nice to sit down, and sometimes there isn't even anything that has to be said with some people. You could be in the same room and you don't need to say anything, because just being with someone and you can talk about things. So I find this quite inspiring. So thank you very much.
Thank you. It's been really, really nice. Yeah.
TJ, is there anything that you would like to say about your art that we haven't brought up?
I don't know, really. I just honestly, I do have a goal now, which is I really just want to paint Black Joy. That's my main focus. And I enjoy doing it. I do genuinely love doing it. I love coming up with the ideas, and I love seeing them like work in some capacity. And I know it's already been said, so it's not really something new, but yeah, that's pretty much it. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you. I think we'll leave it there for today. Thank you for coming onto the third show of Ran Usha's Conversation on Art. Thank you, and Grand Rising Claire, thank you very much.
Thank you both.
And TJ, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure and an honor. And I remember seeing you in reception.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for coming to watching the show. Bye.